Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for people to join in, and then we'll get this session going. We'll just give it a minute or so for people to come out of the waiting room and join us on the webinar. Okay, just a few more coming in out of the waiting room. Okay. What we'll do is we'll kick off and to respect everybody's time. We'll get going, and people will continue to join us as we come in. And great, someone's already introduced themselves. From being in London. Great. Thanks very much for joining us. Good to see you. So very quickly, welcome to today's webinar on AI and the cultural and people elements around it in terms of the experience and how to really make the best of it. So my name is Derek Bishop. I'm one of the co-founders of Culture Consultancy, and I oversee a number of client programs and work with some of the executive teams of our clients. And prior to being in consultancy, I was a change leader within financial services and global organization. I'm joined today by Emma Rose Hurst. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Emma Rose and I work with Culture Consultancy on all things culture and experience. And before this, I was 3 years at Novartis doing a big tech installation there. So sticking in Workday, slightly different to AI, but similar kind of principles. And before that, consultancy in brand and culture.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. So today we're going to explore a number of topics over the next sort of 45 minutes. And then we'll do some Q&As towards the end. But what we're going to do is through the session, so that we can tailor the content to where you are at as participants for this session. We're going to ask you a number of questions along the way, just so that we can zoom in on the particular challenges you're facing or where you are with your organization. So we'll introduce some of those questions along the way. But also, if you do have some specific questions, please just drop them in the chat, and then we'll pick them up for the Q&A session towards the end. So feel free to drop them into the chat as we go. So just to start us off in the right track, I really just wanted to ask a very quick question now of so that we can, again, to tailor the content of this session is right in terms of your organization first question is, do you have an AI adoption strategy? And if you do, does it include the people or culture element? Just so that we know what your starting point is, really. And simplistically for this, I just really want you to put a response in the chat that says, if you have an AI adoption strategy and it does include people or culture, please just put yes, yes. If you have an adoption strategy, but it doesn't include the people or culture elements, just say yes, no. If you don't have an adoption strategy, just put no. And then if you're not sure, then that's totally okay as well. Just put don't know. So if you do, yeah, okay, let's just see what we've got. Okay, so we have some that okay, so we have a number of people that don't have adoption strategy. We do have one that actually does actually have adoption strategy and also the people and culture elements to it. Andrew McCaffrey, is great to hear. But a number of people actually who do have a strategy in place, but it doesn't actually pick up on the people or cultural elements of it. So for the most part, that's what we're going to be covering today is how the people and cultural experience and how that needs to work alongside the AI adoption strategy. So because the two very much need to go hand in hand to work alongside and really harness the benefits of it. But the pattern we're seeing is that often organizations are pouring a lot of money into the technology, into the tools, and investing in that, but not really looking at how well equipped people really are for it. And when I say equipped. That doesn't, it's not just about training. We can train people in the use of these tools, but actually equipping is so much more than that. It is about helping people understand why we're doing this. So really understanding the awareness and the context around AI, what it's capable of, and some of the parameters of it. It's then also about ensuring people have the real clarity of what's expected of them. So in using these tools, what is it that I need to be considering? What does good look like? What am I allowed to? What are my boundaries and what are my guardrails, if you like, for being able to adopt the tools effectively? It's also about having permission because the adoption of AI does come with a significant amount of experimentation. So you need to be have an environment whereby people feel equipped to experiment and test and learn. Um, and then finally, yeah, do I feel supported by my manager in terms of actually doing some of that trial and error and trying to create this habit? So equipped is so much more than just training, which people often just think of as being the fundamental, really. But Emma Rose, what else are you seeing in terms of some of the work that you've been working on?
So we're seeing a lot of this, what we call shadow AI, or quiet resistance to start off with. And that's really people digging their heels in and saying, you're putting in this AI thing, or you're telling me to do this AI thing, but no, or I'm not really sure, and just digging heels in a very kind of primitive way. And we get kind of 30% of people admit to sabotaging their organization's efforts around AI. So that might be refusing to use it. It might be saying, or I've actually spoken to a few people saying, I'm not going to train the AI that you're building because I'm not going to train it to do my job. I know you're going to replace me at some point with AI, but I'm not going to help you do that. That was quite an interesting conversation hearing that from people. Um, and we also get within there this kind of the tension between IT departments and everyone else because IT are putting in AI, leadership are telling them to do so, but it's not really working for people. They're just saying, right, this is the way we're going to do it, but it's not helpful, it's not beneficial. We get lots saying you want it to do complicated things, but why can't you just get it to do some admin for me? Why can't you take off the easy bits off my plate? We get this idea of shadow AI, which I'm sure you've all heard about. So almost half of people admit to using their personal accounts um, at work. And that's because they don't know what else they should be doing. So they're being put under pressure to use AI, but not being told what they can use or how they can use it so that I'll figure it out myself. I've got a ChatGPT account, I've got a Claude account. And then obviously that's behind the radar of the organization's security systems. So we get a lot of security breaches. And even McKinsey got hit by this a few weeks ago. So it's a big issue for people. And unsurprisingly, we hear a lot of anxiety about job security. So the numbers vary, but 80-90% of people say that they are scared about the impact of AI on their long-term and their short-term job security. Um, and it's not just necessarily the anxiety around my job. Some of it's also around the fear of experimentation and trying to do things. If we don't have if we haven't been told clearly what we can and how we can and what we should be doing, we don't we don't feel like we've got permission to experiment. We're trying to figure out this new thing. It's like anything that's new, you're going to get it wrong. So people are stressed and anxious about that. And then they're more likely to make mistakes, or they don't have the permission to make mistakes. And so then they're running into troubles in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, on those last 2 points, as with the client on Monday, and the thing around people using their personal accounts. So that with this organization, they were using Microsoft Copilot, but actually what they discovered was people were using a lot of their own personal accounts because they found it much easier, or they found they're getting better results from it. Um, but then actually people didn't want to talk about the fact that they were using because of the anxiety around it and things like that. So sort of like wanted to you play with it and use it in some respects, but almost doing it quietly and not using approved tools. Now, in that instance, the organization, quite a large organization, didn't have a full-on for adoption strategy in place and certainly hadn't picked up on the people dynamics of it. But that was just a story that just came out from just a general conversation on Monday. So that some of these things are very interlinked in terms of how people feel, therefore, really, isn't it?
Very much so, very much so. And I think we've got a few kind of leaders in the organization saying AI is not really a, it is a tech challenge, but actually it's a cultural challenge, and getting people to make the change is a tough bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's some. So again, so I mentioned about wanted to just ask some questions of everybody as we went through. So just so that we can understand again some of your perspectives on it in terms of what people feel within your organization. So if you can just if you just want to scan the QR code here, and what we're looking at here is really about do your people feel safe, confident, and in control when using AI? So if you scan the QR code or go to menti.com and key in that code on the right hand side, and it's really just select the one that you feel most represents what the people in your organization will feel in terms of the level of safety and security and feeling control around using AI. So if we just take a minute just to complete that, and then we'll see what some of the early results are. Okay, let's have a look. Okay. Okay, so we've got quite a bias toward, a general pattern here of people using AI when told to, but don't fully trust it, and concerns aren't properly addressed, which in some respects links back to your point that you were just talking about there, Emma Rose, wasn't it? About people feeling uncertain about it
Yeah.
and their concerns around it. And then Okay, and then we've got one is sort of most people feel AI supports their work and there are clear ways to share feedback. Okay, but general pattern, which is sort of what we're seeing as well at the moment, isn't it, Emma Rose, in terms of like people are using it, but almost they're needing to be advised to do it, but don't have that anxiety and concerns around it.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this, put under pressure to use it, do something with it. And it's not necessarily great. So, how we have the term AI slop in social media, we also have work slop. And it's not necessarily making people's output better. Some people, I've had conversations with people recently saying, actually, it takes me longer now to write an email because I keep putting it in and it'll tell me this, and then I want to tweak that. So I'm actually going backwards and forwards. Or we've got organizations that are tracking use of AI. So how much time are you spending on it? And even some I know of that are, say like big ad networks. And within the group, they will say, this agency is using it this much, so many hours a week or number of tokens, and kind of gamifying it against other agencies in the group. But there's no measure there of kind of the value of it. Are their results any better? Are they saving time? Are they being more efficient? So it's very much just AI for AI's sake. It's like when we had Bitcoin for Bitcoin's sake. This kind of idea of work swap isn't necessarily getting better. And actually Meta are in the news today because they're surveying and introducing like how many keypad touches are you doing in AI? But again, I haven't seen reference to actually is that making kind of better at their jobs? What are they saying there?
That's interesting. That takes me back many years ago when I used to run contact centers and actually measuring everything in terms of, the wait time, call time, wrap up time, and every little component when you start talking about tracking sort of the level of use, keystrokes in terms of AI. That's quite something, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and it's not saying is my customer happier at the end of it? Is my employee happier at the end of it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that the thing around the usage, I mean, again, I was doing something the other day, and actually I was using two different tools to help me shape a presentation, and actually both gave me different answers. And actually, there was some nuggets of stuff in there, but it did take me then more work to then pull together the final presentation. But there was some gems of the idea there that were really good. But did it did it get me there faster? No. Did I get a better outcome? Yes. But so it's not just about saving time. Is it a better outcome really? Um,
Something else I've heard as well is people are, right, AI, do my presentation for me, write this thing for me, but then they don't know the content themselves. So
mm,
then they can't go and present it, or they can't go and take that to a customer because it's not theirs. So that's are our robots going to come and actually do the presentation for us?
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
balance there.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And so then in terms of what's the cultural challenge around this then from I guess in some respects therefore the biggest challenge around the AI side of things is around the creating the culture of adoption then really, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've got quite a few notable CEOs recently who've come out and said that AI, the technology, is miles ahead. It's actually us as people that are limiting the adoption and the powers that it could have, not just in the workplace, but in the world.
Yeah. Okay. And but I think one of the considerations here, therefore, is around the sort of the ownership of adoption. Um, and so, you know, what we've got is what we're seeing is this dynamic whereby leadership are thinking that they've set the direction, they've allocated the investment, into it, and therefore are making an assumption that adoption will happen. And you know, what we're seeing therefore is a gap between we've invested in the technology versus people using it well, and this tension that you mentioned earlier on about IT thinks HR is HR's job to get the people to do it, and then HR thinking it's an IT job because you're talking about technology, and it's been technology implementations in the past have always been that needed to be that where you've got to cover the human element as you mentioned about your Workday implementation. Implementing it effectively requires changes of behaviors and taking people on the journey. But it's I guess the tension here is around that there's an assumption that actually that its adoption is happening, but actually there isn't a clear, it's less clear between IT and HR about who is creating the right level of environment, who is creating the culture to make that right. Um, and so you've got this perspective of a disconnect between, some of the research showing that 75% of the C-suite, saying their organization has successfully adopted AI, but in conversely, only 45% of employees are saying that's the case. And so there is definitely a mismatch there around actually have we created the culture that enables for AI adoption and the experimentation and learning which goes with that really. And some of that I think links to, you know, if you think about starting points of, okay, have we helped people really understand what tasks should be done by people or AI or a mix of both, really? And so you've got to start with this test and learn, get the clarity about what's expected, get the guardrails in place, but then really start with some thinking around what tasks are with people, are a blend, are with AI. So yeah, I just thought actually let's just have another quick poll on this one, just to see where people are in terms of that. Do we know which tasks should be done by people or AI or a mix of both, and just get a bit of a perspective from participants on where where your organization is currently. So again, if you go back to the same browser, it probably the question should have moved on to for you to be able to complete this. If not, scan the QR code again and or put in that code at menti.com and let's see what people feel in terms of knowing which task should be done by people, AI, or a mix. Okay. So in some respects, possibly not surprising, therefore, in terms of based on the previous poll of people really just trying to figure out their own ways of using AI, but there's no shared approach is seems to be the biggest pattern, obviously, but some now moving into that place of starting to define it and maybe having a bit more of a structured approach to the AI adoption, really. Um, how does that fit with what what you've seen, Amarise?
Yeah, it fits pretty well. So most research and most things I've seen is kind of abandonment rather than adoption. So here's the technology, and then that's kind of it. So abandoning people and getting them to just figure it out by themselves. Whereas if you think about the way that you normally or you should do a big tech implementation, you go, who's affected? And then you do your change impact assessment. So what is the impact of that change on them? And what do we need to communicate and prepare them for and all of their different work processes? Something we came up with to help clients with this is what we're calling this human AI clarity framework, which kind of does what it says on the tin. So for each task that could be done, you kind of say, what's the role for AI and what's the role for a human? And for AI, that could be, you can brainstorm with it, you can use it to speed up that process, you can use it to synthesize information. It could be offering you advice, or it could be something that you want to automate. AI can do it all. And then what does a human do? Well, we're kind of seeing a massive trend for doubling down on the human elements of humaning. So anything around empathy or personal dynamics and relationships, judgments, anything that could be deemed a bit sensitive. So those roles are going to stay human for the foreseeable. Um, and then what are the risks? So AI is only as good as the information it's been kind of trained on. It can obviously be inaccurate. It can make mistakes too. It makes hallucinations. And you're always going to need to have some guardrails in place. So if we flip to the next slide, we can kind of see an example of what this could look like for some different workflows. So if you took something simple like triaging IT support tickets, AI could go through those, it can categorize them, it can suggest some responses, and it can kind of prioritize like what can be responded to automatically, what might need to go to one team, what might need to go to another. But there's always going to be exceptions. There's definitely going to be some security issues that a human's going to have to step in and deal with, and then you'll have some unusual cases. So then you can see where you need to put in your guardrails around sensitivity and kind of data security. And similarly on things like customer feedback, it can do a great job where, you can say, yes, everyone stick in the customer research. It'll help you find some themes and spot some trends, and it might come up with some good sentiment analysis. But you're still going to need to interpret that and figure out what we want to do with it. You're still going to have to do the making sense part. So you might have in your guardrail there about you've got to validate the themes before you can send any reports out. So it's just a nice, simple way of walking through any particular task. What does a human do? What does AI do? What's your risk? And then kind of what guardrails and kind of security protocols do we need to have in place?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that struck me, isn't it, is I listened to somebody talk through some scenarios the other day, is that there's still, you mentioned about hallucinations, and you can't 100% guarantee that what the results you're going to get from AI are right. And someone was telling me the other day about how re they were getting it to do some analysis and actually doing some response rate calculations on actually on a survey, and it had done the first round and produced a response rate, but then when it's doing some deeper analysis, it actually didn't go back and actually came up with a false response rate on the survey. So it's just a very simple but start reminder of actually all of this needs to pass through the human to almost do the sense check of, does this look right, and doing your own sort of tech checks and balances on it to make sure that you're not leading yourself into a dangerous place of misquoting information, or that could come under scrutiny, and lead you down to different to the wrong decisions as well, really.
Yeah, very much so. And some of it's around the prompts that you give AI, and we kind of it's like when you ask a question or explain something to someone, the way that you have it in your head may not be the way it's interpreted. So AI just interprets it differently to you've input it, and it can make mistakes. So there's two layers there that we kind of see. So you've got to comes into the training and the capability building as well that goes around the putting in of the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I guess it has Derek touched a little bit on change management and how what this means for change management, but I know that's a world that you're very close to. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the fundamental things for me is that you know, adoption of AI is we're moving into an arena now whereby it's not a one and done change or transformation. So, what we're moving into phase now is a start of a continuous evolution, and this isn't just about adoption of AI. Adoption of AI is going to continue to evolve because the tools are constantly evolving. Okay, so whereas you would have done maybe an SAP implementation or something before, and okay, you do the major implementation, and yes, there are always some refinements that you do as you continue to re-engineer, etc. But I think the thing with the AI tools are going to keep advancing at quite a pace. So that means that therefore you're never going to be probably in a steady state of use of AI because the tools will keep advancing very quickly. But actually, I think that creates a different challenge and an opportunity in that the greater use of AI is going to mean that organizations are going to continually evolve as well. So because they'll be using AI to challenge and come up with new ideas and find different ways of doing things. And so organizations are gonna be constantly transforming themselves. So it's almost like for me now, we're going to be moving through a phase of transformations being seen as a program which might have an end state for like system implementation, but into continuous transformation. And I think that's going to be challenging for everybody within an organization including for leadership, because it's a different mindset and skill set to have that continuous transformational leadership and really be taking people on that journey continuously, not to a set endpoint, but to an ever evolving picture, really. So I think, it's going to be quite a challenge, and we're going to need to shift from some of the, historical ways of, a project go live to continuous evolution, define training for a fixed implementation to recurring capability building, the comms and engagement you usually do about an implementation. That's going to be a constant theme in terms of needing to continue to do that. And sort of, some implementations might have been about a process compliance, but very much this is about judgment and experimentation. And along with that is embedding is you're continuously embedding. You're not just embedding it once and moving with it. You'll be continually learning and embedding new ways of working. So for me, it's a significant change leadership mindset shift, if you like, and what's required because of not just AI evolving and continuing to evolve very rapidly, but how AI will enable organizations to continually evolve as well at a pace that's
Yeah.
probably really
And interesting when you hear a lot of change fatigue around in the current, from lots of having lots of consecutive different change programs. How do we shift from that into, okay, it's not just going to be program after program after program, it's going to be always kind of maybe a slower pace of change, maybe a faster pace of change. And how do you make sure the leadership and your people are on board with that journey and prepared for it and kind of um, on the bandwagon and helping you push it forward rather than trying to slow it down?
Yeah. And that's gonna bring on a whole new level of resilience and adaptability for people generally, really. So it's one for people to really get their minds around that about that continuous transformation, because it will shift into that place and will only continue. Probably the pace will just get faster. Um, but if we sort of then look at if we look at it in the context of AI adoption, so if we're just trying to get some structure around, okay, what would be the best ways of going about doing it, then we've sort of been working with this four-stage journey, if you like, in terms of like, first of all, really about helping people with the awareness about what is AI in AI in their organizational context. Why are we using it? What problems are we trying to solve with it at this point in time? What are we intentionally not trying to automate? perhaps because it really does require extensive human effort at this point in time. So, and really, what are the cyber risks that come with the adoption of AI? Yeah, and if you take some of the examples earlier on, you mentioned MROs around, people using personal accounts, and it does that, or people uploading company sensitive information into that. Um, so I think this the whole raising people's awareness, and it's not like it stops. You need to be continuously taking people on that journey, but that awareness is really critical. Before then, you can then spend time really providing the clarity around, well, where, where do you use AI? Where do the humans come into it? What are the touch points? What are the checkpoints? And how does that seamlessly work between, an individual working with an AI agent, but still firmly staying in control of it and in charge of it, if you like? What are the non-negotiables, the things that say, actually, at this point in time, the organization, we're not doing these things. Um, what does good look like? So that again, providing people with that clarity of, you know, not just using it so you're shown to be using it, but using it effectively and trying out and setting that real clarity. And also really the guardrails and guidance around staying safe and secure, because if we don't have that clarity for people right at it, in their early stages or constantly updating around that clarity of security, then you're going to be opening up risks. So I think that you've got a real sort of awareness and clarity uh, perspective. Before then, you really want people to be fully experimenting. And what I think from what we're seeing so far is people have jumped to the experimentation without doing some of the awareness and clarity setting as a lead into that. Um, but in terms of experimentation, it really has to, really start with some of the low risk items, the high friction work, and just what are the creating those safe test cases where people can test and learn, um, find out what happens, explore it, but really sense check, is it giving the right outcomes? Is it achieving the right thing? Is it having the right impact that we're looking to? Are the results accurate? And really just having experimentation and making it safe for people to say this isn't working here and now. This tool, this current setup and how we're using it, this doesn't work for this scenario. Take the learnings from it and say, well, it's not about every experiment is going to be right. I think it's really important around the test and learn and feel like actually an answer of it's not right at the moment is a good answer if that's the right answer. Yeah. Um, but I think through that experimentation side of it, then you can get into the where you need to really make it part of the culture and part of the creating those habits whereby you embed it as part of some of the normal daily workflows. Even getting it AI and what people are learning, what people are trying, getting those discussions happening as part of team meetings and manager check-ins, so that managers are also leaders and managers are sort of role modeling what good looks like when it comes to adoption of AI and test and learn and trying things out, you know, making sure people are adopting the guardrails and there's no undue risk that is naturally just falling into the way people work. So I think that's got to be reforming, keeping that habit formation happening, which means the culture needs to shift with that to enable that to happen. But it's not always about getting it right straight away. I think it's really important from what you're saying, isn't it, Emma Rose?
Yeah, I think it's really important to give people the permission to have a play around. Like when you learn any technology, any tool, anything in your personal or your professional life, we're going to get it wrong. It's going to be a bit slow to start off with. We might do it differently to someone else might. Um, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I'm seeing forgotten is giving people permission to play and to test and to learn. And that needs to come right from the beginning of when we start making people aware, like, yes, okay, we want you to, but also just making sure it's baked into the culture, into the day to day. You can have a quick chat about it as well as it being a formal agenda item.
Yeah. So that really does point to this thing about what we're seeing is most organizations are sort of stalling at this clarity and experimentation because they haven't set things, gone back to the really being okay, you need to play with it. work within these parameters and get some learning out to them before you start trying to go for full on adoption, if you like. Yeah.
I think a useful kind of way of looking at it is often before we go into an actual change program, there's some quick kind of litmus tests that we can do with organizations to, in the very first instance, is are we even ready to hit go? Have we got the foundations in place? So it might be, we touched on this earlier, but if people are using AI, but it's not been talked about, that's probably a warning sign that there's a lot of shadow AI going on, a lot of things that we don't want to be seeing. So we need to get on the front foot. If we're seeing that, we need to do something. Um, if your managers can't explain when and how to use it, again, it means everyone's figuring it out, and not doing it in the probably the most efficient, but also the safest way. If legal and security is seen as blockers, that's definitely a risk for obvious reasons. We want them to be facilitating and finding ways to open things up, not just shutting things down. If we see teams are reinventing prompts, so that might be you've got three different teams coming up with a different way of doing the same thing, or it might be that they've all come to the same solution on their own. Why haven't we found a more efficient way of kind of getting everyone using this workflow, using this AI in the same way to start off with? We need to be on the front foot. Um, and again, this thing of there's a lot of activity, but we don't know whether that's valuable. So people are spending hours on AI. Great. Does it mean their work's any better? Maybe, maybe not. What are we measuring?
Mm. So it
Um,
really does speak to the there's a lot of the continuous learning that needs to go on here, doesn't it, in terms of people openly sharing what they're trying, what they've learned, what's worked, even which you would normally do with a system implementation. But I think here is so dynamic that you really want the open dialogue, don't you, in terms of what's helping, what's getting in the way, what are people learning, and so that speed of the right adoption can happen that much faster.
yeah, and it's tricky because the technology is like, changing by the day. And so organizations are planning and then running into, a brick wall a few minutes down the line. So I think it was in the news yesterday, Uber have maxed out their annual budget for AI within the first 4 months of the year because Claude is charging them per token per use. So that puts the massive blockers on, and that has greater organizational impact than just AI because you can't suddenly pluck that money. So the scale of this is huge.
Mm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And there's probably some things in there that people wouldn't naturally think about, like the token usage and about how you hit a limit and how that racks up. Um,
Yeah. So, if you're incentivizing people to spend time on AI, great, but then actually that could be costing us a lot of money. So that ties you into questions like this of what are we actually trying to use AI to improve? So is it to improve our speed? Is it to improve our customer services, our presentations? What are we actually trying to do? And that's kind of the first question that we should be able to answer. And all of these are things we should be able to sit down with the leadership team and kind of pin down, not easily, but they're important things to be able to do. The second one, so what still stays human, that ties into what we spoke about earlier about where is human judgment invaluable. So we might want to be known for actually any managerial situation. It's always going to be person. We don't use it for internal feedback or anything like that. So where does a human stay important? What data never goes in a public tool for obvious reasons. That's a huge one, and I don't think it's made clear enough in many organizations I've seen. Um, number four, what do we need to measure to see whether we are driving value as well as volume? So should we be measuring time spent to do something or our actual volume of output? What is it that this should get us to? Um, and again, this gets you down onto the ground level. what do we want managers to encourage or challenge? So, like any value that you would roll out in an organization, we should have some behaviors that we want to see, some things that we want to see people doing, and some things that we never want people to do, and we deter them from doing so. What are those things? You should be able to kind of put those down like you would in a behavioral competency framework.
Mm, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one around the value side of things. Yeah, I guess the key critical thing is about the mindset around, is this just about, is the focusing on the value, not just volume or productivity or time spent. I was listening to a story the other day where actually, for an organization, they've taken quite subset of their call recordings from sales and call inquiries, the calls that they've had, and then done some analysis through AI, and actually how that's then identified that sometimes the people on the call don't, it's not involving all the right stakeholders.
Hmm.
And actually, they hadn't recognized that they needed to invite, proactively ask the person, well, who else needs to be on this call? Is there one other person that needs to be on this call, in order to help you, prospective client, decide whether this is the right answer for you? So even through that, and it's like, well, actually, is that something they predicted they would get out of doing some analysis of all their
Hmm.
calls? No. But would it add value? Yes, because probably they're going to help those prospective clients, you know, answer that question in advance, in terms of saying, do we have all the right people on this call, so that it's a productive and effective use of time in reaching the answer of, is this right for you or not, in terms of the solution we're offering, for example. So um yeah, that's not about volume, that is, or speed. That's about getting the right, in that instance, getting the right people into the session to help the prospective client make a decision
Yeah.
as quickly as possible, rather than having to have repeated calls, which would cost the prospective organization more time and money, as well as the solution provider as well in this instance.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I know the Department of Work and Pensions were good in being really clear about when and what they wanted people to use it for. So they said, use it to help give people clear job advice. So use it for putting in some data, finding out about them, and drafting your emails. And it saves them, I think it was 26 minutes, 25 to 26 minutes per person per day. So you can see how when you create that clarity of what you want people to achieve and what you want people to do, it can be beneficial.
Yeah, and I guess some of that quantifying that there, there's an element of experimentation that goes on, that means you don't know what you're gonna get out of it. But if the important thing is about the mindset around the value, and then you can learn from it and then target it in, so that then you can quantify the benefits of it. In that example there,
Yeah.
with the Department of Work and Pensions, really. Um, yeah, so these sorts of questions are things that are quite key, but then also, and keep revisiting, I guess, in some respects, isn't it? Really, it's not just answer them now and then it will carry on. Um, Okay, conscious of time, so I just got probably a couple more minutes on something here. So, and then we can transition to like any Q&A. So, for those on the webinar, if you do have some specific questions that you would like us to pick up, then please just drop them in the chat, and we'll come to them in a few minutes. All right. Um, so, I guess the part of this now is around, okay, what's often people think is, yeah, this is such a big thing. How do we progress? What do we do? And so what we've been learning is that actually the first step is can be a lot smaller than people think, because actually you need to get some clarity around things. So if you overlook the cultural and the employee experience elements around an implementation, as is the same with any big technology implementation, then the the adoption and the effectiveness and the value you get out of the technology is going to fall short from your expectations. So um, key is around really having that, clarity, avoiding ambiguity, trying to reduce the level of anxiety, and also definitely reduce the potential inconsistent use of AI. So for many organizations, and particularly where, based on the responses right at the beginning of this webinar, in terms of like, does your AI adoption strategy actually include people and cultural elements? And for those who don't have an adoption strategy, this is even vitally important as well, is what is starting with getting some clarity around where the friction, risks, and ambiguities are so that you can work out and provide that clarity to people. So often we're starting with this, this short insight phase around like really getting to grips with the level of understanding around AI, the concerns, the blockers, you know, trying to uncover the shadow AI and what's really going on in practice, and really determine the gaps and risks, so that you can get to grips with what's the lived reality now around AI adoption and what's getting in the way, how is it really being used, to get so you're building forward from a solid understanding, if you like. Um, and then from that, then you can start bringing some clarity to people in terms of like defining those guardrails, setting, being clear about, what you're expecting from people in terms of their roles, and the expectation around the test and learn and the experimentation, and that's what you're expecting people to really do. Um, so and then also like that, as you mentioned earlier on about the human and the AI element, is like, mapping out, as you did with that matrix earlier, around, well, where does the human come into it? Where's AI going to play a role, and how does those things work together, so that people have that clarity of it's not just handing it all over to AI and then just shipping out the answer. It's actually taking responsibility for key elements. Um, there is the thing around the ethics and the governance frameworks and the security, because there is the need for those guardrails and to be set, and really then just setting some shared language terminology, about how to be talking about AI, so that recognizing that there is levels of uncertainty for people, nervousness around it, and that will be influencing, as you mentioned earlier, how people behave around AI and what they're open about in terms of use of AI. And then having provided that clarity, then you can like, okay, well, what leaders and what support is needed for leaders and teams to really apply it consistently. So, making sure that the leadership, that coming back to that point earlier on about continuous change and transformation, is like, okay, ensuring the leadership have that mindset around it, and have the underlying human sort of storytelling skills and capability to lead and engage people on that continuous transformation. Um, but also then probably just as fundamental is about equipping managers to be able to have those conversations with their teams, probably because that's probably where the first, you need to create an environment whereby people feel safe to talk about, what they're experiencing. Or do you think MROs in terms of that being quite critical at a team level?
Very much so, because if you just have the message coming from leadership, it sounds distant and it doesn't sound real. It sounds like it's something for them, not for us. And that happens with kind of all types of messages in organizations. And so being able to have your manager say very clearly what this means for us and our team can be very powerful in these kind of scenarios.
Yeah, and then if you can create that environment within in your team, then it's about creating it across multiple teams and then being able to share the learning across the different teams, really. So some of that, therefore, is about that role modeling, the collaboration across different teams, and but also, the shared learning and the capability building, because probably different teams will learn at a different pace.
Hmm.
So that whole shared learning, not just within team, but across different teams, to be able to connect the dots and spot the bigger opportunities, is probably some of that benefit of cross-team collaboration, really, isn't it, in terms of shared learning?
Very much, very much.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I think, our sort of experience so far is very much about breaking it down into like smaller stages, and because if you try and tackle it all as one thing, then it can become too big, and therefore you're not moving fast enough. But if you break it down into a small series of steps, that actually allows you to progress AI adoption in a safe way, but in an intentional way, then you'll actually make faster progress, because you're getting the learning come through faster, rather than trying to work everything out at the beginning, because by the time you work everything out, actually things would have moved on anyway. There'll be a new tool that's out there, a new release that's available, and that's which just illustrates the point that this is a continuous thing, really. Did you have any other final sort of comments or anything that you wanted to pick up on MROs just
No, I
and
think
then
we've got to flex those muscles, get the muscle working, and get it embedded, and then get it working.
yeah, yeah, okay. So, does anybody have any questions that they wanted to throw into the chat that from a, from an adoption point of view in terms of the people, employee experience, the cultural point of view, or just the adoption of the AI generally that people wanted to throw into MROs or myself to quickly answer now? Oh, Daniel, you've raised your hand. Can you Are you able to come off mute? And if not, just put your question in the chat and we'll have a discussion around it. Uh, okay. All right. Okay, great. Okay. So it's first of all then. So then, please share your input then. Okay. Can't you can't unmute yourself? Okay. We'll see if we can unmute you there, so that you can give some input. In the meantime, there's a question here from Leah Memorosa. If adoption is impeded by concerns about AI replacing my role, how can this be managed?
I mean, it's definitely a tricky one, especially when there are layoffs happening, in the media around us, at neighboring organizations, maybe even at our organization. I think honesty is often the best policy as far as you can be. So I think when there's cloak and daggers involved and just saying, oh, you're fine, nothing's going to change, people know that's not genuine.
Mm.
Um, so coming up with a narrative about this is what the organization is going to use AI for and the direction it is taking us in. Um, and if possible, these are the skills we want you to grow, and this is what it might be taking up your admin time, taking that off your plate, but this is what we would like you to develop and the way we'd like you to push in the future. And something else that I've seen some organizations do quite well is this is your chance to learn and get ahead. Because if you dig your heels in now, we don't do anything about it. Not just we as an organization will suffer, but you will. So by you coming on this journey with us, learning AI, that's actually future proofing.
Yeah. Yeah, which is so you're therefore invested in the people. It's because it's not going to disappear. So actually upskilling people, you're adding value to the individual. So therefore, at least they're building their own capability to be able to navigate this for themselves as well, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Dania, I think we've got you off mute now. If you'd like to,
Yes, hi,
yeah,
hi,
hey, hi.
Emma and Derek. Thank you so much for unmuting me. I honestly and thoroughly enjoyed your session, guys. I've attended few AI sessions, and I strongly believe that your slides has completely different because it's challenging us about lots of questions. Where shall we start from? And this is very insightful, specifically the slide that says about the adoption thing, like who's creating the culture. And I strongly believe it's the ownership starting on an individual level, going to a collective level, if that makes sense. So as Derek mentioned, it's all about the mindset at the end of the day. I like specifically the slide that talks about the 4 stages. Sorry
Mhm.
for the noise in the background. Excuse me, guys. Sorry for the noise in the background. So the 4 stages of effective AI adoption. What I like about that is that it could help in defining who's in charge of what.
Mhm.
For example, you mentioned the awareness. Is it IT or HR? And then you moved on to the clarity. Is it IT or HR?
Mhm.
Personally, and based on my experience as a career advisor, I believe that I had the awareness when it comes to adopting AI at workplace, but I never had the clarity at my workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the risks and things like this? But since I am a risk taker, I decided to just take the risk and take
Right.
that small step, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Again, stepping out of the comfort zone. And this is to confirm what you said, like it starts at the first step and it's often smaller than we think. And
Yeah.
when I took that first step, for example, about creating a practical activity for an age group 16 to 18 on how to create a CV. And for the first time in our career service in the team here at college, we managed to measure the outcomes. Out of 28 students, 25 students put a CV in place because of that practical activity created by AI. So it's time efficient. It's yes, taking that step, taking ownership. But again, am I clear? Do I have clarity about that? I don't think so. So
Mm.
I just took the experience, I took the ownership, and I shared it with my team. But clearly things are different among other departments, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So I really enjoyed what Emma mentioned as well. It's about like play, test, and learn. People, we say, learn while having fun, and that's why I believe my learners were having fun doing the activity, and bang, they ended up like creating a CV. Okay, and out of those 25, 10 have managed to find a job. So
Brilliant.
there are measured outcomes here. But the thing is, are we turning AI into fun? There's pros and cons with everything, but we need clarity. So it's a matter of who's in charge of adopting what. I think it's taking ownership, starting from individual level, and being brave enough to share our experience with SLTs. Thank you so much for your time. I thoroughly
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah. Emma Rose, did you want to pick up on any other points there?
I think just, yeah, creating that clarity for what it is we want people to do. Again, it's super important. It enables people to step forward and get this moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Let's just see if there's any other questions. We've got a minute or so left. If there's any other additional questions from anybody, we'd be happy to pick them up. No. Okay. Okay. All right. So we'll leave it there then. So we'll follow up with those that have joined and those that are unable to join. But if you do want to have a further discussion, if you just want to bounce around ideas or share some of the stories, just like that example there that Nania just shared, then please do get in touch with Emma Rose and myself. We're always happy to talk about the people, culture, and employee experience elements around AI adoption, etc. So please do feel free to get in touch. But we'll send out some follow-up information. And if you've got any questions, then please feel free to get in touch. But thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks, Emma Rose. That was really, really good debate and discussion around everything.
It was. Thank you, everyone.